Welcome back to Talk of the Town on 99.7, 1450 WHTC and WHTC.com.
And we welcome you back to Talk of the Town for this Thursday, August the 20th, and Thursday morning, the third Thursday of the month. We set aside the 10:30 segment to talk about what's going on at Holland City Hall with one of its elected leaders. And this time we have the mayor of the city of Holland on the other side of our Zoom connection, and that is Nathan Bocks. Nathan, good morning and welcome back to WHTC.
Good morning. It's good to see you this morning.
Glad to have you with us. And normally Nathan every couple of months joins us from his offices at Central Park Law to talk about legal issues, probate. Not this time around because we had Ken Bazicki and we grilled him pretty good on some things earlier. And Nathan will be back with us next month about Ask the Attorney. But this time, let's talk about the city of Holland. And you can join in our conversation, not via Zoom, but at 395-1450, 395-1450. I mentioned this on WHTC's morning news earlier this morning about the fact that there are some members of the Holland City Council that are loyal listeners to us that, shall we say, struggled to get out of bed this morning because of the marathon session last night. That's what they pay the city council the big bucks for, little bucks for was what happened last night. Did it come as a surprise to you, Nathan, about the ardor and the length of the discussion over the anti-discrimination ordinance amendment?
It really didn't, Gary. And it was late night. We finished about 1:30 this morning. And I'd be surprised. I think most of the city council members were up early. Most of us have day jobs. And some of us, I know Mike Trethui needs to be at work at 6 o'clock in the morning. Quincy gets up at 5:30 in the morning. I was up about 5:30, 6 o'clock this morning as well. That's just the nature of the job. It did go quite late last night, and that's because we wanted to make sure that we did this right, that we gave the community the opportunity to be able to speak. By my count, we had about 63 people last night who spoke during the public comment period just on the non-discrimination ordinance. And then council had lengthy deliberations, and this is just one of many meetings that we've had about this since January. There has been incredible opportunity for people to be engaged in this process, and we fully expected that it was going to be a long meeting last night, but well worth it.
Have we said the last word on this, or do you think that as maybe perhaps the one dissenting vote was the case of, we might have to revisit it and tweak it even more?
And that's likely to happen. That can happen with any ordinance. The law is constantly changing. As the listeners know, I'm an attorney. If the law were the same and everybody understood everything all the first time and did everything the way that they're supposed to do the first time, I wouldn't have a job as an attorney. So we're always looking, we're always evolving, we're always trying to find opportunities to be able to make it better. And Quincy did have some questions last night, Councilman Byrd did. And I think that with a little more discussion, any concerns that he have will be allayed as well. Because what we were really very careful about doing with this and very deliberative with this was making sure that the ordinance that we have in place in the city of Holland does not go beyond what the state law says and what the federal law says. And Quincy was concerned that there would be appropriate rights for the religious community. And what we were very careful to do is to make sure that we included First Amendment rights, religious protections. Matter of fact, we don't have the ability to be able to provide additional rights that go beyond what the Constitution says, nor do we have the ability to take away rights that are there in the Constitution. What we've done with this ordinance is given the people of Holland a local point of access. If there's an issue with discrimination, we've given them a place to come locally. And I am a firm believer in local government. I would much rather have the people of Holland have a place to be able to come right here in town if there's an issue that's going on, rather than having to try to deal with the state level or the federal level.
If you have a question for Holland City Manager, he's the mayor. He is Nathan
I don't want
Bocks.
Keith's job.
Yeah. Yes. Holland Mayor Nathan Bocks, call us at 395-1450, 395-1450. We're in a Zoom connection, and we are recording it, by the way, the video, so we'll have a link later on. But away from the camera or but actually on the air. Peg McNichol in the WHTC newsroom has a question. Good morning, Peg.
Good morning. I have a face for radio. That's why I'm over here and not in front of the camera. So could you just be a little more specific about what Quincy wanted to change? I was trying to catch this up while I'm watching the video, and I didn't have the document in front of me, but what would have changed if, or what could change if his suggested amendment becomes incorporated in the now existing ordinance?
That's a really good question, and I think that was one of the questions that came before that the council had as well last night. Quincy was asking to, and initially made an amendment to add some additional language regarding religiously based nonprofit organizations. And just the way the process ended up playing out last night, Quincy made an amendment. Quincy Byrd made the amendment. Scott Corbin supported the motion for that amendment, just so that we could have the conversation, because the way parliamentary procedure works, we can't talk about something until we've got a motion on the floor and we've got support for it. And as we discussed it, and one of the things that I really want to make sure that the people of Holland know, this is a council that engages in civil discourse. We may disagree with each other on policy issues, but the respectful conversations that we have with one another, the thoughtful conversations, the ability for us to be able to listen to one another and not talk past one another, but to talk with one another, has been a really important part of this process and a part of everything that council does. And so we said, well, let's have a conversation about this. And as we talked through it, we said, we don't have the ability with the language that Councilman Byrd put forward. We didn't have the ability to be able to make a determination last night of whether that language would go beyond what the US Constitution and the Michigan Constitution allows. And so council just was not comfortable doing that, because we wanted to make sure that the language that we put in place was in line with the US Constitution and with the Michigan Constitution. And so what we said is, and as Gary alluded to, is this the last word on this? It may not be, because what we've asked the city attorney to do is to go and to take a look at that language and compare it to the US Constitution and the interpretation of that, and the Michigan Constitution and the interpretation of that, and see whether it fits and is in alignment with those. And so based on that conversation, actually what happened is Quincy withdrew his motion to amend, and we continued to move forward. But I think that's part and parcel of the way this process has been with this council, is we want to make sure that we're not leaving any stones unturned, that we're letting everybody who wants to speak into the process can speak into the process, and we're thoughtful about each step along the way.
Good morning. You're on the line with Holland Mayor Nathan Bocks.
Good morning. I have an example of some lawsuit that may come up from the ordinance that was passed. You have a man who lives as a woman. Now he wants to move into a Holland, Michigan nursing home with his man partner. Other residents who do not want to be exposed to this complain, and so this hurts the business. Is this a lawsuit that you would handle?
That what you need to remember is that there isn't anything in the Holland ordinance, there isn't any protection in the Holland ordinance that does not already exist under state law and federal law. So there isn't a change that would occur if that, regardless of the situation that you put forward, there isn't a change in what can happen in that circumstance based on what we passed last night. What we did last night was to provide a local point for people to be able to deal with issues of discrimination. And so there isn't any change that would occur one way or another in regard to that circumstance.
But why did we need the ordinance then if it doesn't go beyond state law?
We did that to do two things. One, to make it very clear to the people of Holland that we are in alignment with the United States Constitution and with the state constitution. And for me, I think even more importantly is when there are issues of discrimination, if someone in the city of Holland believes that they have been discriminated against in regard to housing, in regard to employment, in regard to public accommodations, they have a place on the local level. They can go to City Hall and put forth that complaint there. They don't have to go to Lansing. They don't have to go to Washington, D.C. We can help them start that process right here in Holland, Michigan.
Okay, so what do you think of that example that I gave about this nursing home? here in
There-
town that someone
there-
might sue because they want to live there with their man?
My answer to that is the state of Michigan and the federal government and the U.S. Supreme Court have made the decisions in regard to how those things would work. I'll be honest with you, I can't tell you this morning on a Thursday morning how that might play out. But I can tell you that the law that has been in place in this country is still the same as it was yesterday. What we have done here in Holland has said we want to be in line with what the federal government says and what the state government says.
Okay, off the top of your head, what do you think that example would result in?
I don't know. I honestly, I don't know. Without more detail, and that's one of the wonderful things about having state Supreme Courts and U.S. Supreme Courts. We talked last night about the recent U.S. Supreme Court decision in regard to employment, and what the U.S. Supreme Court said was so elegant in the way that they formed their arguments that when I first read them, I thought, I am glad there are people who are much smarter than I am in those courts making those decisions. So I'm going to leave that up to them.
You explained that very well, and thank you.
Thank you very
You're very
much for the call. 395-1450, 395-1450. Peg, you have a follow-up?
Yeah, I want you to talk a little bit about this notion. Lynn Raymond noted there's like a sub paragraph somewhere in there. And again, I can't cite it off the top of my head, but her point was this ordinance is not so much designed to be punitive as it is designed to be a set of guidelines. Is that right? Or how would you frame that?
I frame it exactly that way. It's designed to do two things. One is what most people are focusing on is am I going to get punished for doing one thing or another? But what I wanted to be very clear about, and this was a lot of the discussion last night, is making sure that the people understand what they can do and what they can't do. And I used the analogy last night of speed limit signs. We don't just say to people, don't speed. We tell them what speed they ought to be traveling on a particular road at a particular time, because we don't want people to be violating the law. We don't want people to be violating other people's rights. And so we need to give those guideposts along the way to let people know what the law is. And I think that's what Lynn Raymond was getting at last night is we want to make sure that we're as clear as possible in the language that we're using so that people understand what is within the law and what is not within the law. And again, what we are doing is reiterating the law that is already on the books on the state level and on the federal level.
So you're speaking to something that's very interesting because I've been examining the notion of diversity in employment. We reported on that earlier this week. The West Coast Chamber's talking about you don't want to hire people just to check a diversity box, like, okay, this is a racial hire or a gender hire or whatever, but you want to hire people who broaden your corporate culture. Okay. And I know you guys are talking about a community culture, which is slightly different. But one of the things they talked about was that there is a certain level of adjustment, if not outright discomfort, in adapting to a changing world where people aren't necessarily hiding who they really are, and they're out. Now, I have a former coworker of mine was fired from a job in another state because she had a female partner, and she was a very good reporter, but they fired her. That's how she ended up back in Michigan, simply because they found out she was dating a woman. And so in an environment like that, and I think this speaks to the question the woman had just a moment ago, only not with people living together, but in an environment like that, should somebody get fired, like the funeral director did across the state, they get fired simply because coworkers or a boss finds out they've got a same-sex partner. Where do they go? I mean, do they just go to the city and does somebody come over and say you can't fire so-and-so, or what happens? What's the mechanics of how this ordinance works?
Exactly. I'm happy to answer that question because I think that's important for the community to know as well. This ordinance will go into effect in 21 days. During that time period, we're going to be putting together a process here at the city, and what people will do is they'll come, if they've got an issue like that, they will come to the city, they'll file the complaint with the city, and then that complaint will be passed along to the state of Michigan. And that in that particular situation, it'd be the Michigan Civil Rights Commission, and then they would be the one who would do the investigation on that process and deal with any other issues that any potential punishment that may come from that as well. And the reason why we wanted to do it that way is, one, at the city level, we're not necessarily equipped to do those investigations, and B, we wanted to make sure that the processes that are already in place in the state could be used, because we think that those are even more effective processes than we may be able to have here at the city level.
Nathan, I am going to play you a comment we received last hour. I'm going to hopefully not screw up the audio portion of this, but this was a comment from a caller we had that was talking about this particular comment. Hopefully you can be able to hear it.
How much do you think the tourist trade had to do with the turnabout of the well, for lack of a better word, I guess, conventional thinking of Holland, as you're talking about in the past, and the news person there.
Right. I think that. All right, Nathan, I'm going to have you answer that if you can.
I can only answer that from my perspective, and that is, I don't really think that it had a whole lot in regard to my thinking on this. We did have a non-discrimination ordinance in place before the changes that we made yesterday, but it only dealt with the area of housing. We've added employment and public accommodation to that. And then we've also added some other issues. There's been a whole lot of focus on the LGBTQ community, but I also want to make sure that the public knows that we also added disability, education, familial status, height and weight to that as well. We wanted to make sure that we had a broad, all-encompassing non-discrimination ordinance so that the people of Holland, all of the people of Holland, would be treated the same. And so for me, that was the driving force in this, that it wasn't some outside force, but it was that we wanted to make sure that it was the people of Holland that we were making sure that we were protecting equally.
Yeah, I just wanted you to hear that comment that we had, and then sort of respond appropriately. We got about 2 minutes, and I apologize for throwing this in, but housing incentives, that was also discussed last night. Briefly, what do we got?
We talked about it about a week ago. We have the City of Holland. One of the things that council has done, we set out our objectives every single year and what our priorities are. And for those, this year was the non-discrimination ordinance, the community energy plan, Waterfront Holland, but then also affordable housing. And we have had our city staff working on a matrix that we can use and that we can use with developers to let them know what kinds of things that we would be expecting from them if they were looking for any type of tax incentives from us. And so we're moving forward on that process and making sure that we are doing what we can in regard to trying to incentivize affordable housing in the community as much as we can. City of Holland is not a developer. All we can do is work with other developers and try to make it attractive for them to provide the kind of housing that the City of Holland needs and the City of Holland wants.
The other point, and I want to bring this up, is dealing with the young plant situation in Waterfront Holland. What's the latest on that?
That is, we have engaged consultants out of Chicago who are helping work through the opportunities that are coming forward to us. And we do have what we refer to as a lot of tire kickers that are out there that are looking, because Holland is an attractive community. People really want to be involved here. People want to invest here. Even in the age of COVID, we have lots of folks who are interested in investment and development in the community. And as a mayor, that is an incredibly positive thing to see. But again, we're not developers. We're not experts in waterfront development. And so we're pulling in experts from the private sector to help us wade through these. Ultimately, it's going to come to a public vote. It's public property. So the citizens are going to have the opportunity to have their voice heard again in this process before any decisions are made. But we are moving forward with Waterfront Holland.
Indeed, that was, I'll be honest with you, a very exciting thing. There's a couple of other things I want to ask about that, but unfortunately, as they say, we're out of time.
Oh, it was a pleasure as always.
As always, Nathan, we appreciate your time talking with us today on WHTC's Talk of the Town. Wish you and all council and your family well. I understand it was a happy time for your family this week, so it was nice. And we look forward to chatting with you again soon. Nathan, thank you.
Great. Thanks, Ken.
Thank you very much. That's Nathan Bocks, the Holland Mayor, on WHTC Talk of the Town.